Halfway through Can't Help Falling in Love, Elvis looked down. A boy in the front row, small, pale, clutching an unopened candy bar. The king stopped. The arena went silent. If you love true stories that show the heart behind the legend, stay with us, because this one will remind you why Elvis wasn't just the king. The note hung in the air, unfinished. 1 second, Elvis Presley was mid-chorus of Can't Help Falling in Love. The next he froze, his eyes locked on something in the front row. It was the mid-1970s, a sold-out indoor arena somewhere in the Midwest. 15,000 people swayed under cool blue lights. Scarves and hand-painted signs waved in the air. The scent of hairspray, cigarette smoke and popcorn mingled in the heat rising from the crowd. Spotlights swept across the front rows, catching dust motes and flashes from Kodak cameras. Just below the stage, almost hidden between two adults, sat a boy no older than 7, thin, pale, with an oxygen tube looping over his ears and disappearing behind his neck. On his lap, a piece of cardboard, the edges bent and soft from being held too long. In black marker, uneven letters spelled, "I saved this for you." The boy's hand gripped something wrapped in plain brown paper, not fancy, not store fresh, the kind of wrapping from a vending machine. His thumb rubbed along one corner, over and over like he was working up the courage to give it away. Elvis's head tilted, just slight, his brow furrowed, eyes narrowing past the glare of the stage lights. Witnesses would later say, you could feel the shift in the room, like the show had stopped breathing. The boy's mother leaned forward, her hand on his small shoulder, mouthing, "It's for you." Elvis stepped back from the mic. His left hand rose, palm out toward the band. The music fell away instantly, guitar strings fading, the soft hiss of the amps lingering in the silence. 15,000 people fell quiet. No shouts, no whistle, just the echo of one man's footsteps on the stage floor. He looked down at the boy again. Something in his face changed, from stage presence to something raw, personal. Elvis adjusted the mic stand, then stepped forward. 1 step, 2 step. The front row leaned in, sensing this was not part of the set list. The boy's small fingers tightened around that candy bar, and Elvis started walking toward him. Elvis Presley did something most performers never dared mid-show. He left the center of the stage. Security shifted instantly. One guard started toward him, hand raised to guide him back, but Elvis waved him off without looking. His black leather shoes tapped against the wooden stage, the sound crisp in the sudden quiet. The blue wash of the spotlights followed him as he moved. Scarves fluttered in the draft from the stage fans. You could hear the faint hum of the amplifiers and the rustle of programs clutched in people's hands. The crowd began murmuring, low and unsure, like they were afraid to break the moment. Elvis had a white scarf in one hand, damp from wiping his brow, and his gold microphone in the other. When he reached the front edge, he crouched slightly, scanning past the barrier. Then he saw the boy again, up close this time, the oxygen tube, the pale skin, the brown-wrapped candy bar still in his lap. Elvis knelt down, so close that the boy's wide eyes reflected the stage lights. Witnesses say the singer rested one hand gently on the boy's small fingers. "Is that for me, bud?" he asked, his voice low enough that only those nearest could hear. The boy nodded once, a shy, quick smile. Elvis unwrapped the candy bar halfway, careful not to tear the paper completely. He took a small bite, just enough for the boy to see him enjoy it. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Elvis didn't turn toward them. His eyes stayed on the boy. Most assumed he'd stand, thank the boy, and head back to the microphone. That's what the show schedule would allow. But Elvis didn't move. Instead, he shifted to sit on one knee, microphone dangling loosely by his side. From this angle, the crowd could see something in his expression, something tender, almost protective. "You know," he said, his voice still warm but quieter now, "this is the best gift I've had all night." The boy glanced at his mom, who nodded through tears. Cameras flashed from every direction. People in the first few rows leaned forward, straining to catch every word, every movement. One woman whispered, "I've never seen him do this before." Then, without warning, Elvis raised the microphone again, but not to walk back to the band. He stayed kneeling. He gave the band a small signal, one finger twirling in the air. The guitarist switched to a softer chord progression, something slow and familiar. Elvis looked at the boy and began to sing. Elvis didn't return to the center stage. He stayed right there, one knee on the floor, inches from the boy. The arena lights softened as if someone dimmed the world around them. The band eased into a slow, tender introduction. The guitarist's fingers brushed the strings with a hush. The melody was instantly recognizable. "Love Me Tender." Elvis tilted the mic toward the boy, but kept his gaze locked on him, not the crowd. His voice came low, steady, each word floating in the stillness. In that moment, the cavernous arena felt like a living room. The scent of popcorn, the hum of the amplifiers, the faint squeak of shoes shifting on concrete, all of it faded into the background. Halfway through the stanza, Elvis leaned slightly closer, smiling just enough for the boy to see it wasn't part of a performance. Nearby fans wiped their eyes. One woman later told a local paper, "It was like time stopped, and there were only 2 people in the whole building." Kneel. Elvis remained anchored by the barricade, his knee pressed to the stage floor. Duet. For the last line of the stanza, he gestured for the boy to mouth the words with him. The boy did, barely audible, but enough to make Elvis nod with pride. Scarf. Elvis reached for the white silk scarf in his hand, still damp from wiping his face. He draped it over the boy's neck, letting it settle like a medal. The boy's small hands instinctively tried to return the scarf, as if it was too valuable to keep. Elvis gently pushed it back toward him, closing the boy's fingers over the fabric. A few rows back, someone whispered, "He'll never forget this." The crowd, sensing the intimacy of the moment, didn't scream or cheer. They applauded softly, a rolling wave of respect that swelled and faded. Camera flashes went off in bursts, like distant lightning. Elvis leaned in again, one hand cupped to the side of his mouth. He said something directly into the boy's ear. Whatever it was, it made the boy's eyes widen before breaking into a teary laugh. Nobody else could hear the words. Some fans craned forward, but all they saw was Elvis's lips move and the boy's reaction. As the band held the final chord, Elvis gave the boy's hand one last squeeze. He stood, turned toward the mother, and touched her shoulder in thanks. Then, without addressing the crowd, he walked back toward center stage, the whisper still a mystery to everyone but the boy. The boy's quiet laugh broke the tension. It wasn't loud, but in that hush, it felt like the whole arena heard it. Elvis lingered a heartbeat longer, still crouched low. Fans in the first rows exchanged puzzled glances, trying to lip read. The boy's cheeks glistened in the blue light, his smile shy but unshakable. Later, some fans swore they heard Elvis say, "You're my hero tonight." Others recall a softer promise, "This seat's yours anytime." No one could prove which version was true, except the boy. Elvis finally stood, tucking the mic cable over his wrist. He turned toward the boy's mother. For a moment, she looked startled. Then Elvis leaned in and gave her a brief, tight hug. You could see her shoulders shake as she whispered something back. From the stage, the drummer tapped the rim of his snare, testing the tempo. A low bass note rolled out, filling the air again. The band was waiting on Elvis. He walked slowly to center stage. By the time he reached the mic stand, the audience had regained its voice, applause breaking into cheers. But Elvis wasn't ready to move on without acknowledgement. "This next song," he said into the mic, "is for a young man with the biggest heart in the room." The spotlight slid back toward the boy, catching the white scarf at his neck. A cheer went up from that side of the arena. The opening chords of "You Are Always on My Mind" filled the space. Every few lines, Elvis's eyes would flick back toward the boy. Each time, the boy straightened up in his seat, scarf edges resting against his hospital ID bracelet. To most in the crowd, that seemed like the perfect ending to a one-of-a-kind moment. But they didn't know something was already set in motion. something that would arrive on the boy's doorstep within a week. A woman in the second row wiped her eyes and leaned toward her friend. "He's going to remember that forever," she whispered. She was right, but for reasons she couldn't imagine yet. The song swelled to its final note, Elvis holding it just long enough to make the crowd erupt in a standing ovation. He gave a small bow in the boy's direction before exiting the stage briefly for the set change. Backstage, a road manager scribbled a note on a folded piece of paper. It wasn't for the set list. It was for an address in the crowd. A week later, the boy's mother heard the doorbell ring. It was early, the kind of cold gray morning where even sound feels heavy. She opened the door to find a plain cardboard box on the porch. No flashy packaging, just a neatly typed return label. Graceland, Memphis, Tennessee. The paper smelled faintly of cologne, the clean, musky kind Elvis was known to wear. She bent down, hands trembling, and carried the box to the kitchen table. The boy shuffled in from the hallway, still in his pajamas, scarf draped loosely around his neck. "Who's it from?" he asked, voice scratchy from sleep. She cut through the packing tape, peeling it back with care. Inside, wrapped in layers of tissue, was a small acoustic guitar. It wasn't a toy. It was real, scaled for a child's hands. The finish gleamed under the kitchen light. Across the front, in bold black ink, were the words, "For my friend, love, Elv." The boy froze, his mouth open, eyes darting between his mom and the guitar. She lifted it out, the wood warm from sitting near a heater during shipping. Underneath the guitar lay a folded piece of stationery, ivory paper with a gold crown embossed at the top. She read aloud, "You'll always have a seat in the front row." No signature needed. The handwriting was unmistakable from fan letters and signed photos. The boy touched the strings gently, as if afraid they might break. One pluck, a soft, sweet note, filled the room. His mom wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her robe. That night, he refused to let the guitar out of his sight. He even pulled it under the blankets when he went to bed, scarf still wrapped around his neck. He didn't know it yet, but this wasn't the last time Elvis would see him. Within days, the local paper ran the story, a full column, with a photo of the boy holding the guitar, scarf draped proudly across his shoulders. Neighbors dropped off notes. Classmates signed a card. One headline read, "The King's Gift to a Small Town Boy." Somewhere in Memphis, Elvis saw that photo, and according to one of his band members, he smiled, tapped the picture and said, "We'll see him again." Months later, under the bright lights of another packed arena, Elvis stopped mid-song. Somewhere in the crowd, a familiar white scarf caught his eye. This time, it was a different city, but the same electric energy. 15,000 fans pressed shoulder to shoulder, the smell of popcorn and cigarette smoke drifting in the air. Spotlights swept across faces, flashing on sequins, signs and waving hands. In the third row, slightly to the right of center, sat the boy. The scarf from that first night was around his neck, edges tucked neatly under his shirt. On a thin chain, a small silver guitar pick hung like a medal. He was taller now, color in his cheeks, but the smile was unmistakable. Mid-verse, Elvis pointed directly at him. Fans nearby turned to see who had caught the king's attention. When they spotted the scarf, a cheer erupted from that section. The cameras flashing from the front rows caught the moment. Elvis grinning wide, the boy lifting a hand in a small wave. The image would end up in several newspapers days later. When the song ended, Elvis stepped closer to the edge of the stage. He mouthed, "Still got that candy?" Eyebrows raised, the boy reached into his pocket and pulled out an empty candy wrapper. The crowd laughed when Elvis gave an exaggerated thumbs up. The band launched into Suspicious Mind, but Elvis kept glancing toward that spot in the crowd between verses, giving the boys small nods, as if sharing an inside joke. Only they understood. During the instrumental break, Elvis tossed a fresh scarf into the air, aiming it toward the boys' section. It landed a few rows behind him, but a fan picked it up and passed it forward until it reached his hands. He held it up high, and Elvis gave a quick salute. The arena's photographer, stationed near the pit, caught the entire sequence, scarf in flight, fans passing it down, the boy lifting it skyward. That photo would become one of the most shared images of the tour. As the final notes rang out, Elvis lingered at the edge of the stage, He didn't speak into the mic this time. Instead, he gave a short, crisp, military-style salute toward the boy before turning and walking off into the wings. Backstage, someone mentioned to a crew member, "That's the kid from the candy bar night." Elvis just smiled. "We'll let him tell that story for the rest of his life. If this moved you, share it with someone who believes kindness can stop a room." What's the smallest act of kindness you still remember decades later?